Hello everyone, this is Gary from the Seers Cave, and I'm just doing another little video this evening for you. I thought what I would do this evening is a kind of a little show and tell video about some of the card decks that I use. I'm one of those sort of people. I've always got card decks out and around me and sort of easy to hand really. And the particular ones that I'm going to go through this evening, just kind of quickly talking about them, showing a few of the cards, are some of my personal favourites. I've got 8 different tarot decks out and 4 oracle decks at the moment, which has to be some kind of record for me. So I just want to make a start with the oracle decks, and just going to grab a couple of these to show you. The first two I'm going to start with are a couple of decks by Colette Baron-Reid. This one here is the Wisdom of the Hidden Realms, and I'm just going to sort of show you a few of the cards. The backs on these, it has to be said, are absolutely lovely, as you can see. They have actually got a reversible pattern, just in case you use reverses, which I have to say I generally don't. But just to show you a couple of the cards, I'll show these on the cam. We've got the High Lord of Gratitude and Service there, which has a very sort of, to me, very kind of Dalai Lama kind of feel to it. And then we have the Eagle King, which is there, which is a sort of Native American look. And as you can see, the pictures, this is one of my personal favourites, the Dragon Duel, and as you can see, it's got these two intertwining dragons. I'm really in tune with sort of dragon energy, and I love anything to do with dragons. What you tend to find with these decks, they've got this beautiful, if you take a look at this one again, they've got this beautiful border like a window, and then they have the name of the card up at the top, and then a little sort of legend. I should see if we can just about make that out. And it says inner conflict, morality, and conscious choice. And the book itself goes into great detail about what the various card meanings are, but also, as I say, you can glean an awful lot from the image and the wording on the card as well. And just to pick out one or two more from this particular deck, so I have a lot of decks with me today, and this one is the Cosmos, as you can see. It's a really beautiful deck. It has to be said, all of Colette's decks are wonderful. Now the next one is her Enchanted Map deck, and that also has a fabulous reversible back pattern on it. And one thing I do love about the Oracle decks is this sort of gold binding that you get on the side. I do like that a lot. And just to show you one or two of the images, these are a bit more cryptic. For example, well, although to be fair, that one isn't. Coming Apart, there we have, and here we have another one which says Spirited Place, and they really are just fabulous kind of almost collage images. There's some pretty strange ones. Let me just have a quick look through and see if I can find one of the really odd ones. This is one actually that tends to come up a lot. It's not that strange. It's called Stuck in the Mud, and that card does tend to come up an awful lot. But you do get some pretty weird images, if I may say. Example there, we have one called Rescue, which is almost like a sort of an island in the sky, and then you've got this sort of airship. Now there's a pretty odd image for you, if you can make that one out. What we have is a ship on a crystal ball rolling on a tightrope, and that particular one is called Balancing Act. So they are descriptive of what they're about, and I must admit they are quite wonderful. So that's a couple of my Oracle decks. And my other two, which I'm going to grab now, one of them is vaguely tarot-like and the other one is not. This is the one that is not, and you can see from the back of the image what this one is about. This is the Magical Unicorn deck by Doreen Virtue, and I'm just going to show you a couple of the cards from this. You can see the images on this one. That one is Brothers and Sisters, and then we have Laughter, we have Forgive. So they do have some pretty strong messages on them, and of course Love, and some, you know, kind of fabulous. There's one that really does apply here that I find, saying talk about your feelings. What you find with these is that you have a kind of a catchphrase on the top, and then you have a description of it underneath. I'll just pick on this one, for example, talk about your feelings. It says, tell a friend how you feel, is the catch line on the bottom of it. And I just want to say a couple of words about Doreen Virtue's card decks. This is the only one I have of hers at the moment, but she has just brought a tarot deck out, or she's in the process of doing that. It's due out any time, I think. And there's been an awful lot of unkind things said about her and about her tarot deck, and on social media, and you know, some pretty hurtful and unkind things said. You know, because people have said it variously, she's trying to water down the tarot, or she's trying to kind of make it all fluffy and happy, and it's not meant to be like that. And there's been some pretty hurtful things, I must admit, were it me bringing a tarot deck out, and if I read comments like that, you know, I would be pretty hurt by them, in fairness. I think, in all honesty, you know, if you like the kind of work that Doreen does, if you like the gentler energy that she puts into her decks with angels and fairies and unicorns and things of that nature, you know, you're going to get along fine with her tarot deck. If you don't, if you prefer more down to earth, for want of a way of putting it, kind of energies, or you prefer more conflicting energies or darker energies, you know, you're really not going to get on with any Doreen Virtue deck, I think. But to be really cruel about it and really unpleasant to her, I personally don't think is a responsible or it's not something that, to my way of thinking, has a lot of honour, reacting like that. So I just want to move on to a deck which has the most gorgeous purple back I've seen on any deck, and again, it's another one which has a gold binding on it. This is the Psychic Tarot Oracle by John Holland, and it is kind of like a tarot deck, but it has some important differences. For a start, there are no court cards in this deck. It's purely numbers 1 to 9. There is no 10, because it follows numerological associations, which sees 9 as being completion. So that, you know, because 10 reduces down to a single digit of 1. There's obviously the major arcana in here, renamed, heavily renamed, and they've included, or he has included, should I say, some chakra cards in here as well, which I'll try to locate one and show you. Case in point, one of my favourites, we have the solar plexus chakra, and you can see they all follow that same format, really, of a kind of the symbol blazing in the colour that relates to the chakra, and they have the name of the chakra at the bottom and the card number at the top. But for example, the star card in this deck, which they call Hope, which is a word I've always associated with that particular card, you can kind of see the way that they sort of work. They have the individual suits colour coded. For example, cups are green. We have the Two of Cups here, which they call Spiritual Union. The major arcana, we have the Hermit here, which is called Solitude. They are black. We have the... let me just double check. Yeah, we have the Suit of Swords, or Air, in blue. And here we have the 4, which is Rest and Rejuvenation. There it is, which I do think is a beautiful card. The purple is the Suit of Fire, or Wands, and here we have Accelerated Motion, which is the 8 of Wands. There it is. And it does have a sort of purple colour to it. And then there's a suit which is red, and interestingly, if I can find one, interestingly, red is actually their suit of earth. For example, here we have the 9, which is Material Harvest. And I just find this a really lovely deck. It has the tarot associations in it, and for the way that I tend to read, and this is something I've not really sort of unpacked before, but for the way that I tend to read, when I see the card, when I see its number, when I kind of have that connection, oh, this is the whatever it is of whatever suit, I already have that sort of thought in my head of what the normal associations are. But what you have superimposed here are images that are dreamlike, that have that real sort of intuitive quality to them. And a lot of times the intuitive quality will actually overshadow the, what you might call, quote unquote, normal associations of a card. So it's a really interesting deck to use. Moving on from that deck to the first of the tarot decks I'm going to show you. This was a recent acquisition, and this is the Osho Zen Tarot. Now this is a kind of a normal tarot deck in the sense it has the 78 cards, but it's really reorganized. You know, for example, what we have here is the card of Justice, which they call, in this deck, Breakthrough. And you can see again the images. I mean, this absolutely is one of my all-time favorite images. This is the King of Wands, excuse me, the King of Fire, because again this goes by elemental associations. And instead of a crown, if you can see that on the there, if I can get that there it is. There's an arrow pointing upwards in the little diamond at the bottom. What they've done with this deck is that the arrow pointing upwards is the king. If it points downwards, it's the queen. If it points to your left as you're looking at it, it's the knight, and if it points to your right, it's the page. The suit's obviously fire, water, air and earth, but the way they've done them is you've got the suit of fire, you have the major arcana as normal, but what you also have is, for example, this is the page of air, which they call mind, and you can see the direction the arrow points. It points to your right as you're looking at it. And I'm just going to keep that one out. They also have the suit of water. In this case, this is the 8, which is letting go, which is the 8 of cups, and that sort of feeling of emotionally moving on. What they've done with the earth suit, however, is they've renamed it to rainbows, which you can just about see there in the 4. The miser. Now, if you think about the 4 of pentacles, that's usually the man sat hoarding the coins. So yes, there is that feeling of the miser there. There is an extra card actually in this deck, which I'll endeavour to find some really interesting images. For example, the 5 of rainbows, 5 of earth, is called the outsider, and has this image of a locked gate with a child on the opposite side of it. But I'm just trying to find the extra card in this deck. There's some really, really fabulous cards. This is another one of my favourites, with a bit of a pun actually, and a bit of play on words. Isolation. and this is the 3 of air, so 3 of swords. So it's the one that you would normally recognise as being the heart with the swords through it. The extra card, which no doubt will be at the back of the deck when I'm trying to look for it quickly, is actually the card of the Master. And it's interesting. Oh yes, one I have to point out. The Hierophant, or the Pope in some decks, is actually blank. Yes, that is a blank black card. And they call that no thingness, or nothingness. But it's literally spelled no hyphen thingness. And I think the sort of the book goes into a lot of detail with various things, and I've only had this deck a short time. But I think the principle there is that there's a certain level of enlightenment that you can't teach. So there's a degree of that sort of emptiness in attaining that level of inspiration, that level of enlightenment. This is the additional card, which doesn't have a number, and this is the card of the Master. And that is a picture of Master Osho himself. So, very interesting deck, the Osho Zen. Now, moving on, because we do have a few of these to get through. This next deck is one of the earliest that I got. I've had it a few years now, and this is the Sacred Circle. It's a Celtic computer-generated deck. It's got this wonderful back to it, which is this sort of stone grey with the symbols of the shield and well, actually that's a spear, and then the other side we have a sword, and then we have the chalice at the top. And as you'll see, this is a computer-generated kind of deck. This deck is by Anna Franklin, and again, it's quite a large size. You can see there we've got a character who's actually sort of in the picture as a photograph, and then what she does is she has these sort of computer generated images. Here's another classic, the Page of Wands. As you can see, it's an actual photograph and then computer generated around it. The 4 suits, obviously the same fire, water, earth and air, actually have the suit, for example fire, in the border itself. It's the Ace of Wands there. Water comes out again in the background, and just a really, really beautiful deck. Another one that I have around all the time. Now, by far, one of the most impressive decks I've ever got, and it has to be said one of the most expensive, was this, which is the Tarot of Dreams Special Edition by Ciro Marchetti. And if you've watched my cards of the day, you'll have seen this deck before. Has this wonderful back image to it. The colours on these deck cards are incredibly rich. I mean, for example, there's I'll have to bring these back a bit. There's the Ace of Wands, and the Page of Swords, and he does a really good job with people. There's one card in particular in this deck. I mean, the Ace of Chalices, the Ace of Cups, is incredible. I seem to have all the aces together for some reason. The World card is also very interesting. It has all the elements in it. But there's one in particular that I want to show you. This also has an additional card, which is the World Tree, which I do tend to use sometimes as a kind of a card of connectivity and almost fate in a way. It's the way I tend to think of that card. Some fabulous, fabulous images, especially, for example, the dark images in some of the sword cards, like for example the 9. You can really feel the cold in a card like that. It is quite incredible. But the one I wanted to sort of pull out in particular is probably one of the most handsome cards I've seen in any deck. I mean, just as I'm flicking through, the interesting thing here is, take a look at the borders and you'll see the moon symbol, you'll see a 6, you'll see a 7 towards the bottom, and also a Hebrew symbol, the Hebrew alphabet. He really has gone to town. I mean, for example, if I go with this one here, we have, let's find it. For example, we have the 8 of Wands, and if you look in the top, we have the symbols for both Mercury and Sagittarius. So he has the astrological symbols in here as well. It's just wonderful. And the one I'm actually looking for is the King of Swords, who's in here somewhere. But as always, when you're looking for him, you know, he hides. There he is. And this is without a shadow of a doubt one of the most handsome cards I've ever seen. I mean, imagine that guy walking up to you in a bar. It is just so incredible. Really love this deck. Love it to bits. Pop that up there so I don't bang the microphone. Now I'm going to go to the oldest deck that I have, which is the Robin Wood. And this is a sort of a Wiccan deck, and immediately you can see there's the Hermit. And Robin's artwork is absolutely phenomenal. It really, really is. You know, it's sort of Rider-Waite system, and if I show you, for example, the 8 of Swords, you'll see that. But it does have a slightly more pagan slant to it, in spite of the fact you do occasionally see angels, for example, in the Temperance card. And there is actually the 3 of Swords, which we had in an earlier card. That's the sort of standard image of the heart being pierced. Then we have what I know a friend of mine calls the Connor MacLeod card, and I think you can see why. He's wearing a kilt. But there's one card in particular which does illustrate how this is... Oh, and it has one of the most interesting death cards you will ever see. I mean, look at that. The richness in that card is unbelievable. But it has one of the most unusual cards, again, that you're likely to see. Has quite a racy lovers card. And what I'm looking for at this point, actually, is the Judgment card, because the Judgment card is very, very interesting in this deck. Here it is. It's not your usual angel blowing his horn and calling the dead forth. It's actually a phoenix woman bursting out of a cauldron. So there is a pagan, a sort of Wiccan slant to this deck, which I must admit I do like, and it is probably my go-to deck if I'm unsure of something. This is the deck I go to. It's the one I've had the longest. I've had this deck probably, well, since I was in my early 20s, so probably close to 15 years I've had this deck. And I'm just going to race through a couple of others. Now this next deck is a deck which I know a lot of people again rile against. They don't like the fact that it was redone and redrawn. They don't like the fact that the original deck, the artist was not rehired to do for this one. And they don't like the redrawings, but I must admit I do. And this is the new Mythic Tarot. The original is the Mythic Tarot, which has a blue back with a really funky Greek knotwork edging. But I have to say, I never really liked the images in that deck. I always found them a little bit, I don't know, they just didn't work for me. And what you really do notice, I mean, for example, here's the Emperor card. This is Zeus. And you know, you really do find that these work. The actual artist that's done this one is Giovanni Caselli, and I have to say I do love his work. I mean, this is Apollo appearing in the Sun card, and you know, his work on this deck really is quite amazing. I have to say, I'm a big fan of his. So, you know, I know there's a, you know, people get quite sort of annoyed about the sort of the backstory to how this deck was brought about. But I do tend to think, I mean, we've got, I think this is Athena showing up actually in the Ace of Swords. I do tend to think that sometimes the most worthwhile things are born out of difficulty, and this deck, certainly there's the impression that there was difficulty in this deck coming about. Now, the next one I want to show you is another favourite of mine. I've been wanting this deck for ages now. Finally managed to get hold of it. This is the Norse Tarot by Clive Barrett, and it's got this fantastic sort of knotwork back to it. And then when you go into some of the images, I mean how evocative is a card like that? Now that is the Eight of Cups. So you've got that moving on. It's like clearing the house out and leaving, and all that's left behind are these cups. It's a really, really fascinating deck. I mean, here we have the Seven of Wands, and if you remember our card from earlier, the guy with the kilt on, that's the equivalent card. It really is just fabulous. And of course, the interesting thing is, for example, this is the card of the Sun, and if you look closely at the bottom, you'll see it has a rune as well. That is the rune Wunjo. So the runic associations in this deck are really interesting as well. If you're into Norse, as I very much am, if you're into any Norse mythology, and you can still get hold of a deck because he still does sell them, minus the book, I believe, privately, definitely check out Clive Barrett's Norse Tarot. Now, the penultimate deck I'm going to show you is one of my newest, and this is the Wildwood Tarot, and this is another one which, when I saw the images, I just had to have it. I mean, that gives you some idea. That's the World Tree, which is the World card in this deck. It's Celtic mythology. It's drawn by Will Worthington, who is phenomenal. If you have the Druidcraft Tarot, or either of the Druid oracles, the Animal Oracle or the Plant Oracle, or indeed the Green Man Tree Oracle, I have all of them. His artwork is absolutely fabulous and stunning. I mean, for example, one thing they've done with this deck is they've renamed cups to vessels, they've renamed wands to bows, they've renamed swords to arrows, and pentacles to stones. This is the Four of Bows, Four of Wands, Celebration. And you can see the fire in that. It's like dancing around a sort of fire. And then you get your slightly, sort of, for want of a term, trippy transcendental cards like the Nine of Vessels, which is very interesting indeed. So, and here's one of my favourites. The other weird thing with this deck, I call it weird because I've never seen another deck do it, is the court cards are animals, they're not people. So for example, the Queen of Vessels, Queen of Cups, is a salmon. She's a fish. It's absolutely amazing. Definitely worth checking out. Very new deck out. It was out this year. So I would highly recommend Wildwood Tarot. And the final deck that I'm going to show you is the Druidcraft. I mentioned about having all of the Will Worthington decks, and I have. These are large scale. The images, again, that's the star card. The images are just out of this world. The High Priestess has a real sort of wild-eyed kind of look about her. She's not the calm, meditative character in the Tower of Dreams. She's not the sort of gentle, knowing character in the Robin Wood Tarot. She's this really wild figure. He also has some wonderful sort of shots of Celtic halls. For example, here, this is the Nine of Cups, but from the Druidcraft. So if you remember the sort of trippy card with the cups sort of around the man, here it's more a sort of a hall, a great hall. Love this deck to bits, and there of course we have the Queen of Cups. She was the salmon. in the Wildwood. So definitely Druidcraft Tarot, again drawn by Will Worthington. I think it's Stephanie Carr-Gorm is the actual author in that instance, but I'll check that out, and I'll put a link up to, or a little annotation up to who actually has authored that deck. So I hope you've enjoyed my little walk through some of my decks. I do have up quite a few more, but these are the ones I tend to use on a regular basis. I would love to see your decks. If you want to do a little show and tell, please feel free to do that and post me a little video response. I would love to see it. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. And yeah, have a wonderful day. Enjoy your decks. Share them with people, and obviously with me as well if you want. And blessings, love and light to all.